and I'm happy to have you in studio. Melanie Phillips, author of the book, which I was familiar with a decade ago, Londonistan. Also author of the book, The World Turned Upside Down. And Melanie actually was an ardent leftist. And then she said she was mugged by reality and has become a conservative. And she's on a kind of a cross-country speaking tour, and I'm blessed and privileged to have her in the Twin Cities area. And Melanie, by the way, and as Eric knows, Minnesota is Minnesotistan. This is Little Mogadishu. We have issues here. I have a national audience, but I often refer to the fact that my home base being the Twin Cities. We've got Islamic issues here. It's kind of jihad central. I don't know if you're aware of that.
I have been made more aware of it. I was a little aware of it, but I have been made much more aware of it in the last few days when I've been here.
France recently had an election. They have a new president. There are some in the evangelical community who are looking at him almost as an apocalyptic figure. And I don't say that to be sensational at all. It's just he's a very intriguing figure. You said they perceive him as a centrist. He's not. He's a leftist. Where do you think he could take Europe? Obviously France. We could start with that, but where do you think? France not going to leave the EU, obviously.
Well, he's called a centrist. He's not a centrist in my book.
Right.
To me, he's a fanatical Europhile.
Mm-hmm.
He's somebody who believes that all the answers to all the problems that beleaguer France, in particular Islamization, violent militant Islam, which is causing great violence of the French population on a regular basis, and the allied loss of French national self-government through the fact that it's principal country in the European Union. These two things are linked. France can't control its own immigration policy because it's part of the EU. He thinks that the answer to all these questions and more is more and better and deeper EU. He thinks that the greater loss of the French ability to govern itself is a solution to all these problems. Emmanuel Macron seems to me not a centrist. He stands for the view of the world which is globalist, which is internationalist, which denigrates the nation state, which denigrates the West, which denigrates French culture as a particular culture, and all the rest of it. And this view of the world, which is basically the leftist, progressive, liberal view of the world, whatever you like to call it, is the view of the world which I think basically voters in mainland Europe, in Britain and in America have voted against in great number. The precise reasons for their voting are all very different, clearly. Nevertheless, they're basically in revolt against an establishment view which rides roughshod over the desire of ordinary, decent people to live in a country that they recognize as their own culture and to govern it themselves through their own democratically elected parliament, which they can throw out. Now, Macron stands for the opposite of that, and the revolt against that view which almost brought to power Marine Le Pen. Marine Le Pen, who runs the Front National, the National Front, a party which under her father, who was very explicitly anti-Semitic and a neo-fascist type, she has tried to distance herself and her party from him, I think not entirely, but basically that party was a fringe party which nobody took seriously until very recently. And the reason why Marine Le Pen nearly became president of France, she lost to Emmanuel Macron in the runoff, the final runoff just recently, the reason why she was brought almost to power was because of the very things that Emmanuel Macron, in my view, stands for. So the idea that he's going to solve these problems is false, in my view. In the next 5 years, whatever it is, until the next French presidential election, I think we're going to find the pressures that brought Marine Le Pen to the final runoff in that election are going to increase exponentially. Macron, as a fanatical Europhile, is also deeply hostile to Britain's decision to leave the European Union. He has basically said, I'm going to make it as difficult as possible and I'm going to punish them. This man, is an enemy of democracy. The British people have a right to say that they wish to govern themselves. He doesn't understand that. He doesn't understand what democratic self-government is, quite obviously. So I think he's a potential menace. Quite frankly, not a centrist at all.
We have the same kind of fanatical going on here in our streets. People that can't take the election, take the effects of the election and so on. And we're watching this happen in the streets. I think it's going to get worse, honestly. 3 questions, and these are big ones maybe. Do you have any idea what nation may be the next one to try to bolt from the euro? And I guess I would ask then, is there a possibility of a nation falling to Islamic control inside the euro? And will the European community in the end, will it survive?
The last question first, no. In the end, no. The European Union is founded on a whole series of incompatible premises, of which the most glaring is the idea that you can have a common currency, the euro, serving every nation when these are independent nations and you don't have a common culture. It's not like the United States where you have one country, one nation, united by all the things that unite a nation. And consequently, this dislocation between the currency and the politics means that the whole European European Union project is bound to collapse, plus the appalling pressures that it's inflicted upon itself by its open borders policy, the demographic changes that are taking place, the huge influx of immigrants which it simply cannot sustain. So I wouldn't expect it to last for very long. I don't know when it's going to implode. If a major country were to leave, in addition to Britain, I think it would be its death knell if France were to leave, which there's no prospect of it now doing so under this new president, Emmanuel Macron, but it could do so if, for example, Marine Le Pen came to power at the next French presidential election. That would collapse the European Union completely. As far as which nation might be the next to bolt the European Union or the Euro, and which might be one that becomes basically a Muslim country, I really can't tell you that. I just can't predict this kind of thing.